Louis C.K. is the guy that is the most respected within the comedy circles.
Yes.
But yet he hasn't broken out like, I would say, Chris Rock, 12, 13 years ago, or Eddie Murphy before him, Chappelle.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem like he connects in that mainstream way. And it's interesting because he carries the same respect with his peers that I think those other guys did. But I don't know. What do you think is missing with that? Like, why hasn't he connected on that bigger level?
Louis?
Yeah.
I don't know. Chris is very presentational, and Chris talks about racial things, and Louis will probably be Louis is probably going to make a career for himself like George Carlin, just get very, very prolific, and he's very respected.
That's interesting. I like the George Carlin thing. Same kind of wheelhouse, because it felt like George Carlin was never, within the circles, he was as respected, but he never was as gigantic as, even somebody like Richard Pryor. I felt like Richard Pryor was bigger. Now, that might have been, he might have been just better in a big room.
Right.
But
when I think Chappelle, I don't know, some guys can perform and they're funny.
Right.
And some guys just think funny. To me, George Carlin just thought funny.
But wasn't funny in a room.
No, I don't think it was a great stand-up.
They were asking you about Louis C.K. and Roseanne. Now, Roseanne was someone who gave you one of your first breaks in
my
show
very
business.
first job, yes.
You were actually writing on
love
Roseanne.
yes.
And Louis is a friend of yours.
Louis is, the greatest comic there is.
And in the defense of them, somehow you got to this point where you said,
well,
hey.
It wasn't really a defense of them. They asked me, what do you think of Roseanne, and what she did, and how she's doing. That's what they asked.
Yes.
Because I've been in touch with her.
Yeah.
So the day it happened, I phoned Roseanne, because I know Roseanne, and she was crying, and she was so, upset and heartbroken. I felt so bad. And so I said, I don't know what to say to you, Roseanne, because I've never been through this,
No.
And I said, let me ask a friend of mine that's been through this. And I was talking about Louis C.K.
Yeah.
Now, Roseanne had been really hard on Louis C.K.
Yes, when he was in his controversy, she blasted his
and this
head.
was before he got written up.
Yeah.
She said, she named him. She said, fucking Louis C.K. is doing a lot of bad things. So
you had the idea that they should talk to one another.
Louis did. I talked to Louis, and I said, I was worried about Roseanne, because I talked to her for 2 hours in a row. I was just crying the whole time. And I was like, I'm kind of worried about Roseanne. She's not the strongest person mentally.
Right.
And Louis said, I think I should talk to her, because very few people have been through what we have been through. This particular, a very peculiar event where you say something or you do something and your career is wiped out forever. And this happens instantaneously. So I said, you should talk to her because you've been there. And they conflated that with me saying, because I said, now the victims went through worse, but it wasn't the same as that.
Yeah, what you said was the victims have, at least they don't lose everything.
Yeah.
That's where you got into trouble.
That's where I got into trouble,
Because I have people in my life who are victims of real bad sexual abuse.
I do too,
rape, everything.
Yes.
And they go through. It destroys their life. They're never the same.
Oh, of course
their whole bodies shake at the thought of it. Some of them even black out when they think about this thing. It's horrible.
I know that. And of course, you'd have to have Down syndrome.
Not to know that.
My new word.
Down syndrome. Right. That's a good word.
You'd have to have Down syndrome to not feel sorry for, of course, Me Too is what you want for your daughters. You know what I mean? And
of course.
You want that to be the future world, of course.
Right.
And I meet all kinds of women that have the terrible stories, about what's happened to them. But I wasn't talking about the victims. I was talking about, they asked me about Roseanne. They asked me about Chris Hardwick. They asked me about Louis. And I told them, like if someone murders someone, and goes to jail, right?
Right.
And then he gets out of jail after 10 years. And you go, I'm going to give this guy a job washing dishes because he's done his penance.
Right.
Nobody goes, well, what about the people he murdered? Well, of course they had it off worse,
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the murderer. Give him a dishwasher job,
So do you think that the writer somehow merged all of these thoughts into one thing, or do you feel you were quoted inaccurately, or do you feel like you were treated fairly?
Well, I don't know. The original writer was for the Hollywood Reporter,
right?
And he wrote it, and that wasn't the headline.
Right.
And so I don't know if he even noticed or anything. And then another place called Vulture, which is a WW computer.
Yeah.
They wrote, Norm Macdonald defends Louis Anderson.
Louis C.K. Louis C.K. You can't defend Louis Anderson. What did he do?
I defend, it says, in the headline, Norm Macdonald defends Louis C.K. and Roseanne Barr. And I never defended them,
And, this kind of backlash happens so fast now because of social media. And, Adam, I know you've been involved with the Comedy Store for a long time, but when Louis jumped up at the Comedy Cellar the other night, a couple weeks ago, the Cellar's taken a lot of heat from people who are not necessarily customers,
right?
People,
yeah,
on the other side of the country or whatever. And we didn't, we never had that kind of thing happen before.
No,
well, I'll tell you this, and I did not know this, and maybe you do. Comedians have gone up against Louis.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was talking to some
comedians have said this guy should not be able to ever perform again.
Yeah, I mean, I taught, they all come.
If you're a murderer, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But if you're a murderer, you go to jail and they let you off, 20 years later. And you try to get a job as a busboy. And if the guy says, I'm not hiring that guy, he murdered, and you go, but he did his penance, and now you give him a job. That's the humane thing to do. And people go, well, what about the murdered person? And you go, well, of course, he got worse.
Yeah.
The guy that lost his life, he's doing worse. But it doesn't mean you can't forgive or it's impossible to forgive. I also don't feel anyone owes me an apology in public, I think personally that you owe an apology to anybody that you did ill to. You owe an apology to people that your actions hurt in a financial way or an emotional way. But nobody owes me an apology,
So that's where your shock about comedians comes from.
Yeah, because I don't understand why they're so. I guess I just don't understand how there can be no rules. If the rules are drawn out and set down, then that's one thing. But I always thought the audience would decide whether you're an objectionable comic or even a good comic, And so Louis went up here at the Comedy Cellar, and the audience let him know. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. But if the audience don't like him, then the club won't book him. I mean, that's how things work. And, just because your heart can break for more than one person at the same time, and a person can do a bad thing and you can feel sorry for that person while feeling worse for the person that had the bad thing done to them. This is all so self-evident. It's hard for me to unpack, but I wanted to use the word unpack.
Archaeologists evacuating a trash pit at the Jamestown colony site in Virginia have found direct evidence of human cannibalism. It's believed to be the first historical occurrence of someone eating a bag of dicks.
I don't know. You don't know that phrase.
Me?
That's what you told me before.
I said I don't know the phrase bag. No,
I thought you said that.
It's a Louis C.K. bit, right?
Oh, yeah.
The guy stopped him and
That's
said,
right.